Hi. So we will continue our discussion on Governor Generals that we have started off with. Okay. So we have completed most of the Governor Generals. Now today I'll be starting with Lord Hardinge. Okay. And 5 minutes is enough for Lord Hardinge, and then I'll be discussing about Lord Dalhousie, one of the most important Governor General that we need to discuss. Okay, so if you see the discussion still now, we discussed about Warren Hastings, Cornwallis, Lord William Bentinck, etc., Lord Minto, Lord Hastings, etc. So out of that, Cornwallis is very important and Lord William Bentinck is very important. Okay. Now, after this, when you talk about Lord Dalhousie, he is going to be one of the most important Governor General in the entire history. Okay, so because of 1857 revolt, a lot of significance are attached to 1857 revolt and international movement, freedom struggle, etc. So Dalhousie is one of the most important Governor General, and in fact, there was a question in 2013 mains that Dalhousie, in all probable case, could be called as father of modern India, right? So if you have some idea about Dalhousie, you can clearly answer that question. Like who's called as father of modern India? Rajaram Mohan Roy. Okay, so you can also say that Dalhousie could also be called as father of modern India because of his contribution. If you look at his contribution, you can say Post and Telegraph. Okay, you can talk about PWD department, and most importantly railways, which connected India, and you can talk about Widow Remarriage Act. Okay, and most importantly among all, Wood's Dispatch, which is known as Magna Carta of modern Indian education. So he did a lot of things. Okay, but there was one controversy, obviously doctrine of lapse, and he is known for doctrine of lapse. Okay, so let me start off with Lord Hardinge, then we will move on to Lord Dalhousie. Okay, so Lord Hardinge. Why I am starting with Lord Hardinge is basically because I don't want to alter the order. We are going in that chronology, so we will complete this. Okay, so Lord Hardinge, 2 points I need to discuss is during his time there was ban on female infanticide and ban on human sacrifice. So if you remember, I have already told you Britishers' rule in India should not only be understood in terms of negative consequences, there are a lot of positives, right? So when we started off with Lord Cornwallis, I told you police reform, civil service reform, judicial reform. He introduced rule of law, equality before law, etc. Then when we discussed about Lord William Bentinck, we have seen anti-Sati resolution, anti-Thugi law. Okay, so a lot of social reforms and a lot of other reforms they have done, right? So here Lord Hardinge's time, his time period is 1844 to 1848. Okay, so the first point that I need to discuss is ban on human sacrifice. Okay, ban on human sacrifice. So this was a very famous practice, especially among the particular tribal section, the Gonds of Madhya Pradesh. Okay, very common practice that a young male boy will be sacrificed to please or appease the god. Okay, so if you are not getting rain or if you have certain problems, issues to the community, you sacrifice a young male boy, which is prevalent among this particular tribal sections, Gonds of Madhya Pradesh. Okay, so ban on human sacrifice. Second is ban on female infanticide. Okay, so ban on female infanticide. See, female infanticide again was a common practice in certain part of the area, and especially certain caste. Okay, like if you see Rajput caste, there were Kshatriyas, so, and they don't want to have female babies, right? So there were ban on female infanticide. See, you can see such kind of reforms during British time, but the point is, see, this kinds of law like anti-Sati resolution, ban on human sacrifice, ban on female infanticide, okay, which is related to a particular sections like a caste, or this is again tribes or a community. Okay, if you look at Sati, which is also a particular religion and a particular caste among the upper caste Hindus, right? Again, you can see during Dalhousie time, Widow Remarriage Act. Okay, so these kinds of legislations or laws will work only with the support of the society. See, if the society is not supporting, you cannot implement these laws. And if you see the case of India, that's what the paradox you can see. The society is very, very orthodox, but the state is modern and progressive. So state is coming up with these laws, but the society or the people at that time was not in a position to see these as good reforms. Okay, in fact, they started thinking that the Britishers or the outsiders unnecessarily started interfering in their religious and personal lives. Okay, so they never got the support of local people or the society or the community. So you cannot see, and all these culminated into 1857 revolt. So when we talk about 1857 revolt, we'll be discussing about economic cause, political cause, military cause, which is the most important reason, and then obviously socio-religious causes. Okay, so in that all these things will come. So this was one of the reason, these reforms that they introduced are one of the reason for 1857 revolt. The people or the upper caste Brahmins and elite Muslims, they started thinking that Britishers are unnecessarily interfering in their religion through these legislations and laws. Okay, so you can see after 1857 revolt, they are not interfering in any such religious matters, and there is no such reforms you can see after 1857 revolt, and such legislations you can see only after independence. Okay, and that was one of the things that they have realized after 1857 revolt. If you touch the religion, that will create problem and you cannot rule in India further. Okay, so you cannot see any such effort after 1857, except you can see in 1872 Universal Marriage Act was passed by Lord Northbrook. Okay, apart from that you cannot see any such reforms or legislations or laws which is touching the religion. Okay, so that's about Lord Hardinge. Now let's move on to the most important Governor General, in my opinion most important among all, that is Lord Dalhousie. Lord Dalhousie. His tenure is 1848 to 1856. Okay, I told you there is no fixed tenure for Governor General. Some will come for few months. Okay, some will come for years. If you see Warren Hastings 73 to 85, 12 years. Okay, so here 8 years. Okay, there is no fixed tenure for Governor Generals. Now 1856 is going, he is making almost all the reasons for 1857 revolt, and he left, and Lord Canning, who is the next Governor General of India, who is coming and who is suppressing the revolt. Okay, we'll come to that. So let's look at Lord Dalhousie in detail. Okay, the first point, if you want to talk about Dalhousie, the first point is again related to D. D is matching. See, some of the students is always having a confusion between subsidiary alliance and doctrine of lapse. So you may mistakenly think that subsidiary alliance is introduced by Lord Dalhousie. In fact, subsidiary alliance question was asked this year. Okay, so it was introduced by Lord Wellesley, but doctrine of lapse is Dalhousie. So you can match with DD. Okay, so doctrine of lapse is what we need to discuss. Now what is this doctrine of lapse? Under this, the states which did not have a direct hire will be annexed under British territory, and the state will not recognize the adopted son. So I hope you are clear with the existing situation now, because Lord Hastings times they changed their policy. They started annexing more and more areas because of two reasons. Right? Because industrialization already established in England, and if you see 1813 Charter Act during Lord Minto time, that led to end of monopoly, so many companies started coming to India. So now there is a competition, they need more market to sell their product, and they need raw materials also, right? So for these two reasons, you can see Lord Hastings time onwards, there is a change in policy that they started annexing more and more areas. Okay, so they tried a lot of methods, and doctrine of lapse is one of the method. That means if a king did not have a direct son or a direct hire, the state will be annexed to British territory, and the state is not allowed to nominate the adopted son as a successor, or the state will not recognize the adopted son as a successor. So if you don't have a direct son, that state will be annexed under British territory. Okay, so that's the idea, that's the concept of doctrine of lapse, and this is something which all of you know. Okay, there is nothing new in this, you know this from 9th standard onwards, then there is no point in discussing that, all of you know this. But whether it is applicable to all the states or is it applicable to certain states only, that's what you need to know from UPSC point of view. Okay, when you will get objective questions, or even if you need to write mains exam, you need to know whether it is applicable to all the states or what kinds of state it is applicable. So if you remember, when I have discussed about Lord Cornwallis, I told you there are issues with laws in India, right? Adoption law, in case of civil cases, right? So when we discussed about adoption law, I told you adoption is not valid among Muslims. So certainly among Muslims, that means among Mughals, this law was not applicable. Okay, we'll come to that. Okay, so let me tell you which kinds of states it is applicable, which kinds of states it's not applicable, or let's try to understand what are the types of states. Okay, so let's categorize the states into three. So let's understand what is this three categories of states. The first one is the states which were neither part of Mughals nor part of Marathas, nor even paying tax to them. Okay, so what I mean is, they are not part of Mughals, they are not part of Marathas. Okay, so they are independent, Now there is a provision of remaining independent by paying tax to Mughals and Marathas. So partial control. But here which state I am talking about is actually completely independent. They are not part of Mughals, not part of Marathas, nor even paying tax to them. So not paying tax to them also. So they are completely independent. Okay, that means which kinds of state I am referring to. See, the states where Mughals are not interested, Marathas are also not interested. Obviously Britishers are also not interested. I am talking about northeastern part, central part, where mostly the tribals and jungle areas. Okay, so they were independent. So this is the first category of state, and the point is doctrine of lapse is not applicable in this state. That means the king or the ruler can nominate anyone as their successor, whether adopted son or any son, they can nominate as the successor. So doctrine of lapse is not applicable in this kinds of state. I hope you understood the first category. The states which were neither part of Mughals nor part of Marathas nor paying tax to them. Okay, so doctrine of lapse is not applicable here. You can nominate anyone as a successor. You don't want the permission of anyone. So Mughals are not interested in these states. Marathas are not interested in these areas. Britishers are also not interested. Mostly jungles and tribals. Okay, so what will be the second category of state? If you make a modification in this, the states which were neither part of Mughals or Marathas, okay, but they are not completely independent, they may pay tax to Mughals or Marathas. Okay, so the second category, the states which were either paid tax to them or were part of them. Okay, so I am talking about the states which were either paid tax, okay, or were part of either of them. See, some states, they are part of either Mughals or Marathas. If they are not part of them, they are paying tax to them. So I hope you got the difference between first and second. The first category is they are not part of them, not paying tax also, completely independent. Here I am talking about those states which may be part of them, or if they are not part of them, they are paying tax to them. Okay, so they are not independent completely. Okay, so this kinds of state, what they need to do is, if they need to nominate the adopted son as the successor, they need to write a letter to the Governor General. Basically, you need to get the permission from Governor General. And when you write to the Governor General, when you ask for the permission, it will be granted automatically. Okay, so it's just like, you need to get the permission from the Governor General. That means doctrine of lapse is not applicable here also. So I hope you got a complete idea about these two states. First category, the states which were neither part of Mughals nor part of Marathas nor paying tax to them, complete independent. Second category, the states which were either part of Mughals or Marathas, or if they are not part of them, they are paying tax to them. Okay, so in these two states, doctrine of lapse is not applicable. What is the speciality of the second category? You need to write a letter to the Governor General and the permission will be granted. First category, you have nothing to do. You can nominate anyone as the successor. Okay, so then in which kinds of states it is applicable? So the states which were created under British Charter. Okay, so the states which were created under British Charter, doctrine of lapse is applicable. That means the states which were created under British Charter, if you don't have a direct son, if you don't have a direct heir, that state or the king is not allowed to nominate the adopted son as the successor, and the state will not recognize the adopted son as the successor also. So that state will be annexed to the British territory directly. I hope this is clear. Okay, so the doctrine of lapse policy is applicable to this state only. So now I hope you might have got complete idea about doctrine of lapse. It's not applicable for all the states which do not have a direct heir or a direct son. Okay, so the states which were created under British Charter is what we need to look for. So I hope you got the idea about three categories of states. Okay, now we need to see which states were annexed. Okay, so you can go back to the books or you can search in internet and you can get it easily. So you'll get questions related to which among the following states were annexed under doctrine of lapse, and you'll get different states. Okay, or you'll get questions like match the following. Okay, so arrange in the chronological order also you'll get. Okay, you will get number of states and arrange in the chronological order in as per the annexation of these states under doctrine of lapse. Or you need to get match the following, like one state and the year on the other side. So you need to pick which among the following is correct with respect to the state and the year in which it is annexed. So you can look for those states which were annexed and you can see the year also. So match the following question, chronological order question. Otherwise also you can expect question from this. And these 3 points also you need to remember. Okay, so if you get this question in mains, you should write all these things. That's the advantage that you're going to get, because you may not get this from the textbooks. I'm sure for that. Now if you look at the states which were the victims of this policy, the states like Satara, Jaipur. Okay, see, you can refer to this. There is no point in wasting time in this. Okay, Jaipur, Sambalpur. Okay, Bhagat, Sambalpur, Bhagat, Udaipur, Jhansi, and Nagpur. Okay, so these are the states which were annexed under doctrine of lapse, and you can see some more states also if you go to the internet. Now if you look at this, you can understand one thing: only Hindu states were annexed. Why? Because I already told you when we discussed about Lord Baron Hastings and the civil cases, adoption is not valid among Muslims. So there is no concept of adoption among Muslims, so no need to have this kind of law among Muslims. Okay, so the states which were annexed under this policy, if you look at this, all were Hindu states. So the most important point in Dalhousie, time is over. Now let's look at the next point. Okay, so we are going in the chronological order. So there was a war in 1848-49, the second Anglo Punjab war. Okay, very famous war. So the first war was in 1845-46. Okay, and after the first war, Punjab was forced to sign a treaty, and the treaty was Treaty of Lahore. Okay, very famous Treaty of Lahore. So actually this treaty was the reason for the second war, because after the first war, Punjab was in under the control of East India Company because of this treaty. Okay, so this treaty was humiliating. So the king of Punjab during this time, Maharaja Dilip Singh, okay, he thought he will fight a battle, and in fact Punjab was crushed completely in this battle, and Punjab was annexed under British territory after second Anglo-Punjab war. So second Anglo-Punjab war was very important because Punjab was annexed under British territory. Okay, annexation of Punjab under British territory. And we are discussing this point in more detail when we talk about Wahhabi movement, because Wahhabis are actively fighting against Punjab at that time. And after the annexation of Punjab by the East India Company, you can see Wahhabis are fighting against the company. And when it comes to 1857 revolt, we can see Wahhabis are much more organized and armed than the other people. Now, so Dilip Singh was the king at that time. He was the minor son of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, and after the war, when he was beaten, he was sent to London for higher education. And that's a common thing that the Britishers used to do. You beat a king, you will not allow him to stay over there, you will deport him to some other place. Okay, we have seen that in case of Bahadur Shah Zafar. Okay, we have seen that in case of Baji Rao II, etc. Right? So Baji Rao II was sent to Bitur, a place near Kanpur, and we have seen his son Nana Sahib is actually fighting the battle from Kanpur. So he was originally a Maratha, and how he got Kanpur addresses because of this. Okay, Baji Rao II was sent to Bitur after the Anglo-Punjab war. Okay, now why this war was important is because after this Punjab was completely under the control of British, and Punjab, keep in mind, was a huge big territory. It comprised of India's Punjab, Pakistan's Lahore, Himachal Pradesh, Haryana, etc. Such a huge territory. Very important. Okay. Now, next important point that we need to discuss under Dalhousie is, okay, railways, which is also very important, not from point of view of the prelims, okay, because in prelims hardly you will get questions like, you won't get a question, okay. See, railways was introduced in 1853. First was from Bombay to Tana, okay, 34 kilometers. That's a fact that you need to know. Introduced by Lord Dalhousie, 1853, Bombay to Tana, 34 kilometers. Now, the most important point is actually the impact, okay, which you will be getting question in mains, okay. So if you look at the impact, what we can have a lot of points, okay. So I'll give you two important points as positives and two important points as negative, okay. So let's talk about the positives. So if you see the positives, the point that I need to tell you is it connected India. It connected India. See, till then there was no possibility of a South Indian to go to a North India, and East Indian can come to West India like that, okay. So now there was more connectivity, so a South Indian can meet a North Indian, a Bengali can meet a Punjabi. So all these scenarios have happened because of this, and because of this, nationalism also started emerging. So you can see during 1860s, 70s, nationalism started emerging because India is actually connected. So you can see during this time in 1857, universities were also established in Bombay, Calcutta and Madras. So people from that area coming to this area going to that area. So they have understood about the common culture, commonality and everything, and that led to emergence of nationalism in India. And that was reached at its peak during the time of Lord Lytton's because of his reactionary policies, and in 1885 Congress was formed. Okay, so railways actually connected India, and that led to emergence of nationalism in India. All these points are important. Okay, now again, next positive, if you look at it, challenged untouchability of in India. It challenged untouchability. So I hope you will be knowing about this. The caste system: Brahmins, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra were the Varnas. Okay, and this hierarchical order: Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. Then Avarnas. So they were the Dalits or the untouchables. So you need to maintain a certain distance. Okay, so this concept is no more there after the introduction of railways, at least in train, right? Because there is no reservation for Indians, you will not get seats just like that. Okay, so if you need to travel from one area to the other, you have to take ticket, and everybody will take ticket, and everybody will have to move in the same compartment, touching each other. There is no other way. Okay, so it challenged untouchability. Now if you look at the negative, see, Mahatma Gandhi is talking about these negatives in his book Hind Swaraj. Okay, it was published in Gujarati in 1909. Okay, so if you get a question on this last year trend, if you see, they can ask questions like this. Hind Swaraj published in 1909, originally in Gujarati. Okay, so from this only I have taken these two negatives. One is it led to deindustrialization in India. Deindustrialization in India. So you have to read this point along with 1813 Charter Act and 1833 Charter Act. So if you remember 1813 Charter Act, we have discussed that there was end of monopoly. Okay, so already during this time in England, industrialization is already going and reached at its peak. So a lot of new industries are there, a lot of new capitalists are there. They are looking for markets and they are looking for raw materials, right? So now in 1813 Charter Act, there was a provision of end of monopoly of East India Company. That means any other company can come to India and they can sell in India, right? So many English companies started coming to India, like the Manchester clothes, Liverpool clothes and the finished products. So what happened is, the life of Indian artisans is completely ruined. The man-made products or the handmade products, which is not at all competitive with the products which are coming from England. Those products are very good and finished products, okay? And cost-wise also that is very cheap. So Indian products are not at all competitive with those products. So that led to the life of artisans completely ruined, and that led to deindustrialization in India. And even now also industries are not growing too much because of this, okay? People shifted to agriculture, and that's the reason why even now also 60% or more people are in agriculture, despite the fact that only 14% of the GDP is coming from agriculture. Okay, but again, if you see 1833 Charter Act, you can see end of monopoly completely. 1813, except in two items, those were like exceptions were trade in tea product and trade with China. Now each and every company started moving to each and every corner of villages and started selling their products. So it led to deindustrialization in India. That means there is no further scope of development of industry in India. Okay. Now second negative impact, if you look at, it led to spread of diseases. Okay, certain diseases which were localized now nationalized, like plague, which was there in Pune, but it spread to across country. Okay, so it led to spread of diseases. You can write a lot of points. Okay, so from your imagination also you can write, because this is going to be a very general question. But this two, which was given by Gandhi, that's why I have discussed this 2 points. Deindustrialization is very important. Okay, and in this, connected India is very important. So whatever you feel like, whatever you want, or whatever you come across, you can write all those points. There is no issue at all. Okay, next is in 1853, the first post and telegraph services started. Okay, post and telegraph services started. So Dalhousie started post and telegraph service. Okay, so it was between Calcutta to Agra. Okay, so between Calcutta to Agra. Now again, in 1854, the Indian Post and Telegraph Service started. Okay, so Indian Post and Telegraph Services started in 1854. So the point is, Post and Telegraph was introduced in 1853. Act was in 1854. If you remember, in 1773 Regulating Act, I told you, there was a provision of establishment of Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court was established in 74. But here, the Post and Telegraph Services started in 53 and Act was in 54. Okay, so keep in mind this difference. Now, another very important point that I need to discuss under Lord Dalhousie is, in 1854, something which is very important happened related to education. Okay, so you might be understood what I'm going to discuss now. So the point is something related to education, and that's what we call as Wood's Dispatch. So it was actually named after Charles Wood, who was the president of Board of Control, which is sitting in England. So if you remember, we have discussed about this Board of Control when we discussed about 1784 Pitt's India Act. Okay, so a Board of Control was established in England with 6 members to regulate the affairs of East India Company, and the then president of Board of Control was Charles Wood. Okay, now you can see after some times this Board of Control this will be abolished, and instead Secretary of State post will be created. Okay, so then the first secretary will be Charles Wood again, because he was the then president of Board of Control. Okay, so all these things we'll be discussing later, but here the point is Charles Wood, who was the president of Board of Control, wrote a letter to the Governor General by suggesting certain reforms in education, and that's what we call as Wood's Dispatch. Okay, so we need to see Wood's Dispatch in detail. Now before we discuss about Wood's Dispatch, let's go for a recap of what we have discussed till now related to education. Okay, so we have discussed something related to education in 1813. So 1813 Charter Act, the first such effort related to education happened, that the company was directed to spend rupees 1 lakh for the purpose of betterment of education, okay, in those areas where they have control in, right? Then after that we have seen in 1835, during this time, there was a debate which is going on between Anglicist and Orientalist, and Anglicist won the debate, and they have decided that the Indians will get education in English model and in English medium. So they have decided that they are going to give education in English model and in English medium. That's a higher education. Okay, so they have given importance to higher education, and that's what Macula Minute. And Macula Minute is what we call as trickle-down theory or downward filtration theory, etc. Right? But it did not benefited the masses, because they are focusing on higher education and a minority of Indians. Right? The assumption is this 1% of the Indians who's getting education in English model and in English medium will teach rest of the others in Indian model, right? Or vernacular language. That's the idea. Okay, but it was a failure. Now, what happened is in 1854, Wood's Dispatch is what we need to discuss, how the problem of Macula Minute is solved. This is what Macula Minute, right? Or trickle-down theory or downward filtration theory. As a solution to that, what Wood's Dispatch did. Let's look at the provision, okay? So the first point and the most important point is education for all, or education for masses is now the responsibility of the state. Earlier, Macula Minute, education for few and minority. You educate few, that few will educate rest of the others in vernacular language. Trickle-down theory or downward filtration theory was the assumption, to create a group which will act as a middleman between English and the local Indians, right? But here, education for all and education for masses is now the responsibility of the state. So you can see this is a drastic change, right? At least state took up the responsibility now. So many scholars call it as Magna Carta of modern Indian education. Okay, so Magna Carta is actually a famous order issued by the English king way back in 1215, which granted certain rights to the citizen. So they compared this Wood's Dispatch with that. Okay, so education for all or education for masses, and that's the most important point. Okay, education is not for the elected or selected few, it's for masses. And the second point, if you see, secondary education should be given in vernacular language, okay, and higher education should be in English. So higher education should be in English, already decided during Macula Minute. So we have told already that they have given importance for higher education. Now you can see they are giving importance to secondary education also. But even now, the problem is primary education, nobody is taking care. Even in Macula Minute, they are not mentioning about primary education. Here also they are not talking about primary education. So they have given importance for secondary education. In Macula Minute, higher education is given importance. Here secondary education is given importance. Okay. So first point is education for masses. Second point, education. The secondary education should be in vernacular language. Higher education should be in English language. Third point is actually technological colleges has to be set up. Okay. So technological colleges has to be set up. Okay. And you can see in 1854 at Roorkee, the first engineering college was set up. Okay, so first engineering college was set up at Roorkee in 1854, and now it was converted to IIT during Vajpayee time. Okay, then again if you look at in 1854 in Bihar, okay, so first engineering college was in Roorkee. Now in Bihar, Pusa Institute of Agricultural Sciences. Pusa Institute of Agricultural Sciences was established, okay, so in Bihar, but in 1934 due to an earthquake it was shifted to Delhi. Okay, so originally Pusa Institute of Agricultural Sciences was established in Bihar in 1854. It was shifted to Delhi in 1934 due to earthquake. Okay, the next point is again very important, fourth point, that universities to be opened. Okay, so universities to be opened for higher education. See, till then there was no concept of degree that you are getting now, right? No degree, no post graduation, etc. like BCom, MCom, BA, etc. There was no such concept. Okay, there was madrasa education on one side, Gurukul education on the other side, and we have seen the problems associated with that also. There was no such concept of the graduation or post graduation, etc. Okay, now universities to be opened. Okay, and you can see in 1857, see the Woods Dispatch was in 1854. Again, you need to remember this. 1857. 3 universities were established at Madras, Calcutta and Bombay. Okay, so 3 universities in 3 presidencies, very important. Later when we discuss about during 1860s and 1870s, nationalism was emerging, and one of the most important reasons is this establishment of universities in Bombay, Calcutta and Madras, 3 presidencies. Okay, next fifth point is teachers training programs to be started, right? It's not only the student who need to be taught, the teachers also to be taught in the way that they are going to teach the student. Okay, so this is actually the beginning of the present day B.Ed programs, etc. Okay, so if you look at Woods Dispatch, these are the 5 points that you need to be very careful. So one is education for all or education for masses is now the responsibility of the state. The state took up the responsibility and the problem of Macaulay Minute is solved. Okay, Macaulay Minute was based on the assumption of trickle down theory. Okay, so here we are going to give education for masses. Second point, secondary education is given importance, and secondary education should be in vernacular language and higher education should be in English. That is already decided in Macaulay Minute. Okay, third point, technological colleges to be started, and you can see in 1854 2 technological colleges, one in Roorkee, that was the first engineering college, then in Bihar, that was Pusa Institute of Agricultural Sciences. Then universities to be opened, 3 universities in Calcutta, Bombay and Madras was established or opened in 1857, then teachers training program. So these are the 5 provisions that you need to remember from Woods Dispatch. Okay, now in 1854 you can see PWD started, Public Works Department started. Okay, so the objective was basically to construct roads, canals, bridges, dams, etc. Okay, now it is known for many bad reasons, but this was one of the most important point that you need to remember. PWD started, Public Work Department started, and this acted as developmental tool. Okay, so roads, canals, bridges, dams, etc. were building. That was the objective of this. Okay, and you can see Dalhousie developed a lot of hill stations. Okay, so Dalhousie developed a lot of hill station. This Mussoorie, Nainital, Shimla, Kulu, Manali, etc. So very important. And now Shimla is known as summer capital of British. Okay, Shimla is known as summer capital of British, and Dalhousie in itself is a city. Okay, so all these things happened during Dalhousie time. So he developed a lot of hill station. He established public work department. Another important point is during 1855-56 time there was a powerful rebellion which is going on in the eastern part of India. We call it a Santhal rebellion. Okay, so Santhal rebellion. Now who are Santals? Santals are a tribal group, okay, who are living mostly in modern day Jharkhand, formerly in Bihar, in an area called as Rajmahal Hills. Okay, so Rajmahal Hills. So Santals is a tribal group. So when you talk about Santhal rebellion, it's a tribal rebellion. They were living in Rajmahal Hills in Bihar. Now, what happened? What is the actual reason? See, during this time, many zamindars and many mahajans from cities, they started entering into the area of Santals, and also many contractors. Okay, because we already discussed about PWD. So for development of railways, to cut the trees, okay, to develop dams, etc. Many contractors started entering into their areas. Basically, many outsiders started entering into their areas. So they call these outsiders as Diku. And for them it hardly matters whether you are an Indian or an English. So you can be an Indian. So a lot of English people also used to go in their area. Indians like zamindars, mahajans and contractors also used to go to their area. So they commonly call the outsiders as Dikus. So Santal rebellion was a rebellion between Santals and Dikus, means Santals and outsiders. That outsiders include both Indian and English. Okay. Now what is the reason? These outsiders, they went to their area, they started grabbing their agricultural land, grazing land, etc. and they started exploiting the tribal women. So all this created a lot of issues, and the tribals started fighting against the outsiders or Dikus, and that's what Santal rebellion. So because of the entry of zamindars, Santals were actually subjected to very high rate of taxation, and at the same time they started losing the land also due to this money lenders who's charging very high rate of interest. So a new socio-political or economic situation emerged during that time in those areas, and that is in fact the reason for the present day, the Maoism, Naxalism, etc. during the 60s. Okay, so all these are actually connected. We will come to that when we discuss about those areas. But the point is, Santals were exploited, so they started fighting against Dikus, and that's what Santal rebellion. And the two people who led the movement were Sidhu and Kanu. Sidhu and Kanu. Okay, so two brothers, Sidhu and Kanu, led the movement. So these people started killing the outsiders. Okay, so obviously when you are fighting against state is in an advantageous position, and this movement is suppressed or crushed completely by the state. Okay, but this was one of the initial tribal movement which motivated the future tribal movements. Okay, you can see a lot of tribal uprising later. We will be discussing that in a separate module as a separate chapter. All the tribal uprisings we'll discuss together. Okay, next important point that we need to discuss during Dalhousie time was in 1856 Widow Remarriage Act. Okay, so I told you already during British time there were a lot of positive reforms. We have discussed about Lord William Bentinck Anti-Sati Resolution, now Widow Remarriage Act, and all these actually require the support of the society. But the society was very orthodox, and they have seen all these reforms with great suspicion. They thought Britishers are unnecessarily interfering in their religion, so they could not implement these reforms properly in India because they didn't get any support from the local or the society. And when we discussed about Anti-Sati Resolution, I told you Lord William Bentinck was the Governor General who passed the resolution, but Rajaram Mohan Roy was the Indian who was responsible for that. Here also you can see Lord Dalhousie is the person who started this or implemented this Widow Remarriage Act, but the Indian who was responsible for this or who worked for this is Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. Okay, so the Indian who was worked for this widow remarriages, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. Now when Dalhousie was about to draft this law, Widow Remarriage Act, a lot of Hindu upper caste people, the Brahmins, approached Dalhousie or started writing letters to Dalhousie not to do such kinds of reform, not to touch their religion. Okay, and you can see all this culminated into 1857 revolt later. See, one thing is already we have discussed during Lord Cornwallis time, they have introduced equality before law. See, at least among the Indians they introduced equality, right? So, see, female widow is not allowed to remarry, but a male widow can remarry. That means there is a discrimination, right? They introduced Widow Remarriage Act. Okay? So, if you see an interesting thing, even Bal Gangadhar Tilak was against this law. See, you see certain leaders like Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Mahatma Gandhi, etc. They were politically very, very modern, but socially they were very orthodox. And this paradox you can see even nowadays also in some leaders. Okay, socially very orthodox but politically modern. Okay, now next point that I need to discuss under Lord Dalhousie is in 1856. Okay, that is annexation of Awadh. Annexation of Awadh. See, we have discussed about many annexations. We have discussed about annexation of Punjab just before, after Second Anglo-Punjab War. Before that, we have discussed about annexation of Sindh in 1843, right? So here they started annexing more and more areas, especially after Lord Hastings times. During that time they changed their policy, they started extending their territory, right? Because of two reasons, market and raw material, because of 1813 Charter Act. Okay, all those things you have discussed, so you can connect everything. So annexation of Awadh. So this was the most controversial annexation among all, even controversial than doctrine of lapse, because they annexed Awadh on the reason of misgovernance. Okay, so they have no other reason to give misgovernance. And in fact, Awadh was one of the state who signed subsidiary alliance earlier. So under subsidiary alliance, Britishers are actually promising you that they will protect you from any external threat and they will not interfere in the internal matters, and they are breaking their promise. Okay, so it's very controversial. The Nawab Nawab of Awadh at that time was Wajid Ali Shah. Okay, Wajid Ali Shah. So British accused him of misgovernance and annexed Awadh. Okay, but the point is this was not acceptable to the masses because Awadh was one of the peaceful and prosperous state at that time. And people of Awadh were relatively much better politically or economically or financially or socially in all dimensions compared to other states. And their culture is very famous also. Lucknowi culture is very famous. So this misgovernance, the way the king was accused of misgovernance, it was not digested for the masses. Okay, so there was huge unrest, you can see. And if you observe one more thing, majority of the soldiers of the Bengal army is actually from Awadh. So they have a sympathy with the ruler. So sympathy with the ruler, and you can say this is also one of the reasons for 1857 revolt. So majority of the soldiers of Bengal army are from Awadh, and they have a great sympathy towards the ruler because it was not true. The way the king was accused is not true. Another reason why they participated in 1857 revolt, if you see, that can be economic also. Sympathy will not last for long, right? See, the moment Awadh was annexed, what happened? Awadh will come under English, British India, right? So Awadh will come under permanent settlement. We have discussed in detail about that, or zamindari settlement. So most of the farmers now have to pay much more money as the tax. Earlier you are paying some amount as tax and you used to get benefit from the Nawab, but now you need to pay a lot. There is an exploitation of zamindars and you are not getting any benefit from the state. And I told you already, most of the soldiers are from Awadh. Okay, so their parents or the father is a peasant. So in fact, most of the peasant are actually farmers who are from Awadh, and they are even called as farmers in uniform. So the moment Awadh come under permanent settlement, you need to pay more tax. So that actually affected, or you can say this sympathy, maybe because of that, okay, because of this economic situation. So that is the reason why the soldiers are fighting, okay, 1857 revolt. One of the reason of 1857 revolt, when we discuss political reason, I will tell you annexation of Awadh, okay, because on one side the Begum was also fighting, but if you see from soldiers side, they have a sympathy towards the ruler. At the same time, they have to pay very high rate of tax. So this is what annexation of Awadh. So if you see what all things we have discussed, why Dalhousie is important, because we started off with the doctrine of lapse, very important. We understood three category of state. The states which were neither part of Mughals nor Marathas nor paying tax to them, the doctrine of lapse was not applicable to them. Then we have seen the states which were either part of Mughals or Marathas or paying tax to them, they have to write a letter to the Governor General. So doctrine of lapse is not applicable there also. Third category, the states which are created under British Charter, doctrine of lapse is only applicable there. And we have seen the states which are annexed. Okay. Then we have seen second Anglo Punjab war. Okay. Then we have seen railways. 1853 railways was introduced. Okay. Then we have seen 1853 Post and Telegraph Service, and Post and Telegraph Service Act was in 1854. Then in 1854 we have seen Wood's Dispatch, very important, 5 points. First one, education for masses. Second point, secondary education should be in vernacular language, higher education should be in English. Third point, technological colleges to be established, and we have seen in Roorkee first engineering college, and in Bihar Pusa Institute of Agricultural Sciences. Then fourth point, universities to be opened, and we have seen in 1857 three universities, Calcutta, Bombay and Madras. Then finally teachers training program. Okay. Then we have seen PWD started. Okay. Then we have seen a lot of hill stations were established or developed. Then we have seen Widow Remarriage Act. Okay. Then we have seen Santal Rebellion. Okay. Then we have seen annexation of Awadh. Okay. So all these are happened during Dalhousie time. So very eventful time. A lot of points that you need to remember. So if you get a question on Dalhousie, I hope you will be in a position to answer in a much better way.